everybody's audio is connecting, but I don't think that that's true. I feel like everyone's audio is connected, and it's just look like it's summer outside because things are blooming. You know, the
Was like that here too, but I enjoy that kind of weather.
okay, well then there you go. Well then see that's I'm in DC, so that's part of the difference there, right? Midwest, you're used to the I mean, and also April. You can get a lot of things can happen in April in the Midwest that just belong in the Midwest.
So the last I checked, we had 30 people registered. I only see 9 now, but it's here with Tykee James, and I will let him take the floor. I'm so excited that he's here.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to your group. And, I've done a little bit of research and talked with Jennifer a lot about Mississippi Audubon. I mean, particularly, I want to raise that, I'm proud of the Migratory Bird Treaty Day resolution, not a proclamation, no, a resolution. And the difference is significant. Um, And, I think that's something we could all be proud of because recognizing the importance of bird conservation, of biodiversity in birds is also a way to recognize good environmental conditions and, the folks that make it possible. Now, a little bit about myself. It is true. My name is Tykee James. I am the government affairs coordinator at the National Audubon Society. I am speaking on my own behalf, just so everybody knows. And so with that, I'll back up a little bit. How I got started in the environment. So for me, the path that led me here started as a job. Bird watching for me started as a job. I was working in West Philadelphia, where I was neither born nor raised. I was born in North Philly, and I moved around the country before coming back. And when I came back to Philly, my first job right out of high school was an environmental educator at the Cobbs Creek Community Environmental Education Center. And there, my introduction to birds was also an introduction to park history, was also an introduction to environmental injustice, was also an introduction to seeing the connection between communities and habitats that could share some of the same descriptions, like they were very dependent on each other. My spark bird and the story of my spark bird started as that job where one of my first assignments was to go out and see if I can find that bird. I mean, everybody was given a species, and we were given a field guide to look it up and learn everything we can about it, and hopefully we'll see it. I saw it my next week of work. It was a female belted kingfisher. It was on a cattail. I saw it jump off, do its call as it crossed the creek, and I was mesmerized that I could be so captivated in a moment like that. From seeing something on paper, now I'm seeing it in real life, and it made me think about the type of job that I had. My job was working to get more folks in my community, in my neighborhood, to go to the park, to feel welcome at the park. But I had to realize, in order for folks to feel welcome at the park, I had to understand why they didn't feel welcome there in the first place. Like, I had to do my own research of my own community. I had to listen to folks. Today, about 35 years ago, the move bombing occurred in West Philadelphia. And if you don't know the move bombing, just know, long story short, the mayor of Philadelphia and the police chief of Philadelphia, Frank Rizzo at the time, decided to drop a bomb on a residential house. And they thought that it was necessary, but it actually took the innocent lives of children and leveled a neighborhood in West Philly. You look at today and you're just like, why would that happen? I mean, we kind of know why. And the history has continued to play out. The brutality of police on Black and brown bodies in that community has also shaped how City Hall, how the city of Philadelphia invests in that neighborhood, invest in that zip code. Because where that historic police violence occurred, there's also, an issue of park benches, street lights, and trash cans back when I was working there. Things have gotten a little better as far as park infrastructure. But when you don't have those three basic components, who wants to go to a park? Who wants to go to a park that is not funded to be good? Where other parts of the city, where there are more affluent, where they are more white, those parks look great. They have park benches with names on them. They have street lights with special designs. They have trash cans that let you separate recycling from just waste. I think everybody deserves that. But I also have to understand that that's why I couldn't have that be the measuring stick for why folks didn't feel the same way I did when I saw that kingfisher. I had to understand where folks were coming from. And that's a lot of what I still do today, meeting people where they are and understanding that the context that they are coming from when they think about environmental things, environmental issues, environmental activities are in a frame that is historically based on racism, exclusion, specific decisions to say where resources go and don't go, and what is the criteria that is based on those decisions. We have seen the legacy of those decisions borne out. When I started birding, I thought it was just a job. And when I started birding more and more, that's when I find out that this is actually a hobby for affluent white folks, some of which are my friends today. But it was interesting that I came to birding in a very, very different way than a lot of the folks I started to meet. But I always want to bring that story to show that I think it is very valuable for folks to come into birding, to see it as a way to identify themselves in the environmental movement. I have found birding to be a coalition builder. I have had the pleasure and opportunity to work with a plethora of groups that I don't think I would have met had I not been a birder. And I think that there are experiences of just appreciating the outdoors that I don't think I would appreciate the same way if I was not a birder. And, I do say that it started out as a job, but man, this is something I really love. It's something that I really want to share with a lot of folks. So like I said, birding has always been a way for me to build community and build coalitions and identify myself as part of a movement. One of those movements that folks may be familiar with is Black Birders Week. And for those who don't know, we're on Wikipedia now. I mean, if Wikipedia is your measuring stick for things that are interesting, I found, excuse me, I found that what made Black Birders Week special was that it was local to so many people in so many different ways. Folks came to it in so many different ways. It inspired and motivated more folks to come out of the woodworks, Black birders on and off Twitter, to get out in the field, to share stories, to uplift one another. And I am looking forward to that continuing this year. And Black Birders Week last year, you know, we didn't pick our moment, but it was a time that the Black experience was the national conversation. And we rose to the occasion. When the Black experience was being talked about, and it was heavily on trauma because of the deaths of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, and others. Black Birders Week showed that the Black experience goes beyond trauma, that the Black experience includes joy, pride, strength, resistance, style. And that's something that I'm really proud of. I'm proud that I got to be a part of that. And I'm proud that Black Birders Week, along with other Black-led weeks, have worked as an inspirational feedback loop for one another, have worked as an opportunity for more folks to see the great resumes of these organizers of these events. I think that's really important. This year, for my Black Birders Week, I hope to be more local than I was last year. Last year, I had a lot of fun on the panels and on Twitter. But I also had a broken ankle last year, so I didn't do a whole lot of birding. This year, I got my second vaccine and my inoculation day is today. So I am feeling quite birdie as migration is picking up. And in fact, I picked up my first of year black and white warbler, AKA the People's Warbler. I call it the People's Warbler, and I want everybody to call it the People's Warbler because I think that bird, of all birds that you can see, that bird can get, I think, anybody into birding because it looks like a little zebra climbing on a tree trunk at that. You know, birds, people think twigs and branches and canopy all the way over there, up there. The black and white warbler, it really sticks out. It's a little referee jumping around. It's like my friend Greg Araya calls it a tree creeper, you know, like the warbling tree creeper, because it, you know, jumps around on the tree, and I like that. I also call it the People's Warbler because, you know, in some ways I think it can be a symbol for racial unity. And, you know, I say that jokingly sometimes, but it does make me think about it. How birding is a way to build coalitions that are diverse, that are intersectional, intergenerational, coalitions that we need to sustain the environmental movement. I think birding is a part of that. And so recognizing the black and white warbler in that way, I feel, is just my recognition of that effort. I also saw yellow-throated warbler. That was nice. Don't have a strong symbolism for that bird, but it was a great day. It was a great bird. You know, a lot of fun. And also, if folks have migratory moments that they want to share, just throw them in the chat. Migratory moments. This is, you know, it's not too early. I know that folks have been getting things, and being in the Midwest, I'm sure you get some really great things. I'm in DC, which is the native lands of the Nakachunk peoples. And, you know, I mostly bird in my neighborhood. So I just try to, I'm always happy to see what I can get. But, you know, I saw the warblers actually in Malcolm X Park. It was really, again, a really, really great day. So I talked about Black Birders Week. And one of the things that I want to uplift from that memory, or I was going to talk about what I'm doing this year. Because last year I was really national in my approach to meeting new folks and getting to know people. This year, I want to focus on a big week in DC. I was thinking DC is divided into 8 wards, and I was just going to do 7 days, 8 wards. And then hopefully I see a lot of great stuff, and hopefully that can be an opportunity for me to help uplift other Black birders in DC, in the DMV area, the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. And that's just something that I want to do because I want to center my community in this, and this doesn't rely on partnerships. This doesn't rely on, even big invites. I'm just hoping that the message gets to the right folks, and hope that I can continue to inspire folks and help build a broader movement using bird watching. So from last year, and even, sometimes this year, I've gotten the question, what can I do to help? Because we talk about diversity, we talk about equity, we talk about inclusion, we talk about justice, we talk about what that means in our organizations, but we also talk about what that means as individuals. And so I got the question very often, what can I do to help? And I think that's great, because I think you get help when you inspire folks. Like, you get help from inspiration, not shame. And so the what can I do to help question would typically, and I found a way to generalize my answers into 3 categories: the personal, interpersonal, I should say, the institutional, and the structural. Right? So on the interpersonal level, what can I do to help? That's people to people. I say normalize how you demonstrate your values. No one should be surprised to hear you say, or your organization, but hear you say Black Lives Matter. No one should be confused if you are acknowledging the fact that Black and brown bodies in this country are under threat in ways that are immediately visible and physical when you look at social media and police brutality, but other ways that are more structural and historic. And saying Black Lives Matter should not be a surprise to your supporters if they know your values. If they know your values, those kind of things should not surprise them. If you normalize how you demonstrate your values, you're normalizing and you're acting on your values without ambiguity. Typically when I have a Zoom, I didn't put my name in this Zoom, but on my personal Zoom, I always have my pronouns: he, him, his. I mentioned that I reside in Washington, D.C., the traditional lands of the Nakachunk peoples. I think land recognition is important. I value that, because I think that if we are going to understand how we fix the problems that we have today, we have to know how we got here. And part of knowing how we got here is recognizing where we are. I know today this is called Washington, D.C., but it was never always called that. And it may not be called that in the future. Who knows? 51st state. Something else that I do, if I'm serving on a panel, if I'm, speaking in a group, I always try to keep track of how long I'm talking, because I don't want to go over time. I value everybody's time, and I don't want to overdo it. These are just simple, inclusive practices that I think help interpersonally demonstrate what my values are. Those are just some examples. I think that there are other things folks do that demonstrate their values, like saying bless you when someone sneezes. But how are you demonstrating your values in ways that include a diversity of people? That gets to a deeper question. How are you demonstrating, and how are you normalizing how you demonstrate your values? Because it doesn't always have to happen in crisis. It doesn't always have to happen through a strategic plan that your values are being demonstrated. I think that there's a practice to it. There's a normalization that can come with it. And that's something that I, answer in what can I do to help? Normalize, if these are your values, act on them regularly, practice them regularly, normalize them. So my second answer to that question is on the institutional level. So that's the organizational level. And I say, rationalize your rules, your policies, your bylaws, your MOUs, your handbooks. Rationalize every word, every punctuation, every letter. And when I say rationalize, I mean justify it. Like, why is that rule a rule? Why do you have that there? And if your response is, well, that's the way it's always been done, that's not very helpful. Because in some ways, that argument, that's the way things have always been done, that can perpetuate the problems that have been here the whole time. And it does take some letting go. It takes a balance of discipline. It takes a balance of surrender to think about things in a new way, to say, well, yeah, the way things are is part of the problem of the way things are. And so we have to do things differently. And so when you look at your rules, when you look at the words that created this institution or that this institution runs by, and you comb through it and you find no ambiguity, no hypocrisy of your values in these rules, I would love to see those rules. That would be a fascinating exercise for me, because I don't think that everyone can justify everything in these rules. And where you can't justify those things, I say rewrite them, but rewrite it in a way, in a co-creative process, with the stakeholders. So, if that is in an organization, just make sure the lead volunteers, the employees, the workers, they have a say in what these new rules are, because they're going to be affected by them. And it isn't like we draft the rules, here's some feedback. That's not co-creation. Think about what it takes to co-author a book, to co-author an effort. It means that you don't start with it complete and then send somebody for edits. No, it's let us construct these words together. Let us find the intent. Let's define that together. And then share that accountability moving forward, because this is something that we created together. This is not me telling you. This is not you telling me. This is us telling each other what we can believe in, what we can work on, what our rules are. Because it is going to take some familiarity with discomfort to disrupt the status quo, because the status quo is unsustainable. There's no version of the status quo that we need tomorrow, right? You can't have some of the new stuff. Let me just throw in a little new stuff and still keep the old stuff because that makes me feel comfortable. No, that's not sustainable. And ultimately, you can take an effort that it can be genuinely good and genuinely new and original, and now when you want to combine it with the way things have always been, that effort gets a little dimmer. That effort loses its own guidance. That effort loses vision because it's trying to uphold something that isn't going to keep it alive. So think about changing your rules as a method of addressing the status quo. And I think that everyone will be able to see and feel the benefit of having a volunteer force, a workforce, a board of directors, whoever the stakeholders are. I think everyone can appreciate the benefit of those folks having a true voice in this co-creative process. There are a lot of direct benefits from that. So in review, one, on the interpersonal level, normalize how you demonstrate your values. 2, on the institutional level, rationalize your rules and co-create new ones. And now 3, on the structural level. Structural means groups of institutions. It means the history of decision-making from these institutions that create the society that we're in today. Those are structural phenomena, structural issues. And against those structures, I say we organize. You can organize in group chat. That's what we did for Black Birders Week. You can organize in committee, which is, I'm sure, something a lot of folks are doing in their organizations, new equity, diversity, and inclusion committees, ideal committees, inclusion, diversity, equity, access, and leadership. There's a lot of different letters, a lot of different ways to do it. That's a way to organize people. But I think one of the most powerful and one of the most important ways to organize workers in particular is unionizing. Individuals may be mighty, may have some influence, but in union, we can contain multitudes to disrupt these structures. It is maybe not news to the folks listening right now that the National Audubon, that there is a union effort underway at the National Audubon Society, and I am a member of that Audubon for All union that seeks to have good work at a good workplace. And we're not the only environmental organization that's doing that. And there are other environmental nonprofits that have unions, that have workers with a seat at the table, that have collective bargaining, that have collective power. And I want to say collective power is only a threat to those who benefit from undermining it. Those folks who think that they know better. I don't know who knows better. I don't think I know it all, but I know I can work in coalition. I can work in movement. I can work in union with folks who know more, know differently, and know, things that I don't know, to help make this movement a movement that everybody can be a part of. And this could be a movement where everybody can receive orientation to take action day one, any day. Somebody should be able to be activated to protect important places and protect people from environmental blight. I want an environmental movement that can do that. And I think we can have that if we can work together. We need movements like this because apathy, and ambivalence do not have a stake in progress. We all have a role in this movement, regardless of the color of our hands. This is an all hands on deck operation. We all have a brighter future together, and we can start building for it today. And being in the right place at the right time with the right attitude can count for something. But success is not guaranteed. And that's something that I want everybody to really think about. Success is not guaranteed. It's something that we have to work for. It's something that we have to be ready for. And I think it's something that's worth the work. That's why I'm happy to do these presentations. And I'm also happy to be a part of, efforts that I'm going to talk about actually right now that I think will help the movement, particularly for birders. So part of the future I want to help build has taken the form of a new project I launched on Tuesday, actually. It was with a friend, Mr. Train. His name is Jeffrey. He's from New Jersey. It's called Freedom Birders. Freedom Birders is a movement that seeks to change the culture of bird watching in the United States by developing a racial justice curriculum and bird education project resourced by lessons and inspiration from the civil rights movement, the Freedom Riders, the Black Lives Matter movement, the 1619 Project, and Black Birders Week 2020. I founded this with Mr. Train back in January of 2020, and actually January of this year, 2021, excuse me. And together we created a virtual activity that we call the Freedom Birdhouse that explores the roots of our shared inspiration for this project and highlights the connection of the movement of people, the observation of birds, and the recognition of land. This Freedom Birdhouse that we've created is virtual and it has been shared with a handful of audiences with a facilitation from Jeff and I. And we facilitate grounding conversations from the curated educational resources in the project to promote culturally responsive lessons that engage youth and adults, so everybody in the family, to be beginner-minded, to practice inclusion, to recognize the history of land they share with birds, and to act deliberately on their values. And I'm really proud to be a part of that project, and I'm really proud to announce that our long-term, well, one of our, or I should call it our phase 2 goal. I don't want to call it long-term. I think we're thinking much further than this. But our phase 2 goal is by May 4th, 2021, 22, wow, the years, May 4th, 2022. And why May 4th? Because that's the anniversary of the Freedom Rides. The Freedom Rides was a trip lawyers and civil rights lawyers from the East Coast, especially in DC, took rides in interstate, took bus rides along the interstate to desegregate the bus terminals and to help desegregate lunch counters and to help represent civil rights icons like John Lewis and oh, wow, a lot of names aren't coming to me right now, but John Lewis was definitely one of them. Fannie Lou Hamer, another name, Martin Luther King. And these freedom rides, so I have the map behind me here, just traveled from DC, or not just, but the plan was to travel from DC to New Orleans. They didn't make it to New Orleans, but we hope that we can see some of that inspiration and basically have the vision is a conference on wheels, something that truly connects the stories of the movement of people from the freedom rides story, the observation of birds, and the recognition of land, because what we will be discovering is how racism and how the civil rights movement and how colonialization had an effect in describing the things that we talk about today when we're thinking about birding in the South. During the Black Birders Week discussion with Christian Cooper that I moderated, he talked about no-go zones, and all of those zones were in the South. And a lot of people agreed. Heck, I agreed to some extent. I haven't lived in the South though. And I think that this is something that I can even approach with a beginner mind and have this be something that is equally as rewarding to me as it will be with the folks who take that trip with us. And a model of this growing effort can be seen in the partnership work in the Birding the Harriet Tubman Byway, which is a 4-hour driving and walking tour that familiarizes you with the habitat and wildlife Harriet Tubman would have known very well as a young woman and leader in the history of Black liberation in Dorchester County, Maryland. And that is part of the, that when we talk about long-term goals, we're talking maybe a year, maybe 2 years from now, we see an underground railroad trail that connects places in the South, not just to the Midwest in the Mid-Atlantic, but to Canada. Because remember, Canada was and we could talk about the population, particularly the African population of Canada and how the Underground Railroad had a role in that. We can also talk about that while watching birds. And there's so much that we can learn, and there's so many ways that can be rewarding. And I hope that that's the way that we change birding.
There you go.
How'd you do that?
Hey, how you doing? Now, within a similar vision of opening and changing the way birding is done, I'm delighted to share that I'm a board member for the Birding Co-op, which offers a new take on birding that fosters and centers community and mutual support. The mission of the Birding Co-op is that it is a grassroots organization promoting inclusivity in the global birding community by creating accessible travel experiences that foster meaningful connections among birders and nature's enthusiasts while supporting communities through responsible tourism practices, advocating for social liberties, and advancing science-based environmental changes. Birders vote. Birders care about environmental issues. And I think that we are finding through a lot of folks. I mean, I know I'm talking to the National Audubon Society. I'm talking to a great chapter of the National Audubon. You are familiar with advocacy action, especially locally. So I know that that isn't new. But I want that to be familiar to more people who come into birding. And I want to share that message because I think that if more folks understand that birding is a way to be a part of this bigger movement, it serves them so much more. Now, I am also the co-chair for the Black and Latinx Birders Scholarship Fund. It was launched in 2020 as a regional scholarship for Black and Latinx birders, but now it is available nationwide. We are here to amplify the successes of Black and brown birders by raising funds for annual scholarships and creating networks of support. Right now, we have a scholarship that ranges from a minimum of $2,500 to $5,000. And we are sustainable for at least 2 scholarships this year. And we're looking to get 2 winners. So we want folks to apply before the deadline. And the deadline is June 18th. Hopefully that's easy to remember because it's a day before Juneteenth, June 19th. It would be really great. We get some applications, we get some winners, and we help support Black and brown birders. So check out amplifythefuture.org, check out freedombirders.org, check out the Birding Co-op online. That is a nice platform to check out as well. These are, at least 3 groups that I'm really proud to be a part of, and seeing the way we can change birding and trying to inspire folks to be a part of that, not just spectate or not just hope that things go well, but to be a part of the things that go well. There's a lot of things in the news. There's a lot of things that are happening, even in my organization, that you would imagine everything is a sinking ship. And having an attitude about a sinking ship, I think, you either grab a lifeboat or you grab a bucket. And I'm one of those folks who want to grab a bucket. I really think that the environmental space is something that I found my residency in, and something that I'm very humbled to be a part of. And I want more space for more folks. And I know that there are things that we'll have to change to get there. And I'm happy to be a part of that in any way. And I'm happy to dedicate my life to that call. And with that, I want to go towards questions because I see we have some great questions in the chat that will help me gear the rest of my comments towards you all. So we have our first question from Jennifer. Thank you so much. If we are lacking diversity in groups, such as an Audubon chapter, how do you gain more diversity if you're normalizing Black Lives Matter, as an example, I'm assuming, etc.? How do we represent more of our communities? How do we gain that momentum on this movement? Great question. Oh, yeah, thanks for dropping the website there. So in answering your question, how do we represent more of our communities? I think part of that question relies on a little bit of introspection. Who's we? And then who are the communities that aren't we? And without you being a part of that, like you personally being a part of that, what is the separation between us and them? How did that occur? Because it definitely predates you, right? Like, I don't think anyone on this Zoom pressed a button one day and made birding not diverse, made birding exclusive. I don't think anyone pressed a button on this Zoom and made that happen. But we all have to think about how the status quo of birding perpetuates exclusion. Some of the ways folks have come into birding perpetuates exclusion. If not at all saying that like your experience is excluding people, no. But if someone believes that the only way to be a birder is by having a life list on eBird, I think it's a small barrier, but I think that's exclusive. And I don't think that has anything to do with birding. If the image of birding is one of those who have money to do it, only those who have money to do it, I would, that's exclude. That has nothing to do with birding. And then I bring up those two examples because often that's how birding started for a lot of folks. And it's not about undoing that history, but it's about understanding, okay, if this is how we started, how do we uncentralize ourselves? How do we disassociate while recognizing that that is where a lot of folks, at least that we know, may have gotten started? How do we center and grow a new experience in birding? And I think it is getting new birders to think about birding in a more conscious manner, to think about the lands that they're on, to think about the history and the habitat they share with birds. Now, diversity is an outcome of inclusive practices. So I would also say that, like, diversity is also I think a very objective definition of just different things. How are you measuring diversity is also something that I ask. I mean, I think sometimes, and I can get in trouble for this too, when I talk about diversity, I may be just talking about racial diversity, but there's other types of diversity out there. But as I mentioned before, diversity comes from an outcome of your inclusive practices. So part of the question that I'm thinking about is, how do you include more people? Right? Some of that, as I mentioned before, is being in the right place at the right time with the right attitude. Some of that is normalizing how you demonstrate your values, because people can be attracted to that. People are attracted or not attracted to values and how those values show. Obviously, it can look different for folks because different interpretations. But that's why it's so important to think deliberately, to act deliberately. That leaves less room for ambiguity. I think, and in particular, with Mississippi Audubon, how do we gain that momentum in this movement? I think you're doing it. I mean, at least, and I'm a little biased, I think Jen is an incredible leader. And, I'm very happy to see what she's doing with the chapter. And I think that, the days are just getting brighter. It is about different leaders. It is about finding different folks to lead different things. But it is also about asking yourself, how do we want to grow as an organization? How do we want to grow as a chapter? Are we defining our growth in numbers of donors? Are we describing our growth in the amount of stories, the different kinds of stories that we attract when people think about birding in our community? Yeah, I think that there's a lot of great things happening at Mississippi that makes me feel and believe that you're generating your own momentum in your activities. Oh, and Francis, I see in the chat, you lived in the South and racism is part of the reason that you never returned. Which state, if it's okay if I ask? Oh, and I see that you entered up Louisiana. Oh man, and there was actually a podcast episode. I forgot exactly which is the source of the podcast, but they were talking about sundown towns and how sundown towns people may not think exists anymore, but that feeling of it still kind of exists. And there are things that I can try to articulate as a Black man who has seen the history and who have seen, through history books, I should say, who has seen the brutality of Black bodies as historic artifacts, and seeing, Southern states in year, like those things burn into my head, but I don't want that to be the only thing that's in my head about birding in the South. I think that there's more to it. Just like I believe that the Black experience goes beyond trauma, that it includes joy, pride, history, and strength. My experiences can also include those things. And that's why I think it's valuable to be beginner-minded in a plethora of ways. I'm just sharing how it, one of the ways that it affects me personally. Oh, I just read the rest of what you had in the chat there. And I'm still open for questions for more people if you have any. Excuse me.
Yeah, if anyone's more comfortable unmuting themselves to ask a question, that's perfectly okay too. I just want to say thank you, Tykee. That was a great response. And I do, when you talk about deliberate thinking, I think, that I've been trying to do a lot more of that, in terms of our approach and in what we do with Audubon here in Rockford.
Right. I mean, with the scholarship, the Black and Latinx Birder Scholarship Fund, the way we build partnerships is we have a forum and we have a meeting, and the core question of that meeting is, how are we mutually benefiting? Because we value your mission like you value our mission. And we want to lead with that. We want that to be in the bread and butter of all of our communications, because that's what a partnership is. We are co-authoring our relationship. We are collaborating and mobilizing with one another to do what we do best, do what we love most. And so, that's our value. We take it serious. I mean, and I shouldn't say that it's just about taking it serious. Taking it serious is a tone, but being deliberate is the actual act. And, I see Harlan and Manisha, both of you just went on video. If you have a question, and I see that you're off mute now, Harlan, if you have a question, you can feel free to
just got on. I was busy working on something that I'm doing to try to help the Chamber of Commerce to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. I was so involved in my creative process that I forgot to come on. And I noticed there's not a little red dot in the upper left-hand corner of my screen. So you probably didn't record this. And I'm so sad, because I really want to hear what you had to say. And I don't know how to capture it, except maybe we can talk later. But
yeah, I mean, we're talking now. How are
you? Where are you located?
I'm located in Washington, D.C., the native lands of the Nakachunk peoples. Yes. I actually work for the National Audubon Society too. I am speaking on my own behalf, worth saying. And so you might be seeing or hearing from me in a different capacity at a different time. But happy to answer any other questions.
Yeah, do you have contact information? Can you give it to us?
Oh yeah, absolutely. What's my email? TykeeJamesDC@gmail.com. I will make sure that's also provided.
Chat.
Yeah, I'll make sure I also do that.
And that and your phone number, and I'll be talking with you. I'm working on a goal to help our Chamber of Commerce transform itself.
Right. And I'm sure, Harlan, one of the things you're figuring out is, how did it start that way? Like why is this work relevant today? How did you're looking at yesterday to help define what today is? Because you have to accept that what we're looking at today is a result of people accepting the way things were. And so to undo that, you have to first take a step of understanding how did we get here?
I've been working on this stuff for I'm 79, for over 50 years.
Congrats.
And maybe 60. And last night I spent 5 hours watching reconstruction on public television.
Mm.
A 4-hour show, but they spent a half hour in advertising, wanting you to give money. And it was so revealing and so painful to watch.
Mm.
So I'm acutely aware of how we got this way.
Right.
And I'm what I'm right now trying to do is I'm really glad that you're speaking to the Audubon folks here in the.
Yeah, I love y'all. Audubon, I don't have to, and I want to hear from Manisha. I'm assuming you have a question too. I really do love Audubon's mission. I mean, and I think there are obviously ways that it can be delivered better, but just how it centers chapters in our policy change, how it centers the voice of constituents who happen to maybe also be birders and nature's enthusiasts. I don't see anybody else doing it better. And, I'm really happy to be a part of it, and having folks that are also multi-talented, doing things with different folks, the Chamber of Commerce, that's always incredible. So thank you so much for your question, Harlan. I'm just going to jump to Manisha here. And have I been pronouncing your name right?
Yes, thanks. That's correct. So just one sentence about me. I don't actually even know where this Audubon chapter is. I'm actually in San Francisco, but I am a birder, and I'm really interested in diversity in birding, and I'm actually a new birder. And so I've been going on all of these calls through the year to try to learn more about birds, and different chapters have really great programming. But yeah, I noticed that there's not a lot of racial diversity on these calls. And so I thought that I really wanted to check this talk out, and I'm excited, that you exist, Tykee. I'm excited about the initiatives that you talked about. But, I wanted to say that, so I'm actually a physician and a scientist, and one of the things I study is genetic diversity. And one thing that got me into birding was an interest in sort of the human connection to nature and how we can tap into that, not just for our own healing, but as a way to kind of reconnect with what life is and what we're trying to put out there, and how we kind of engage in a more than human world, if you will.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I was thinking as you were talking, and I really loved how you made it about values, and how values are something that exists at a personal, internal, spiritual level. They exist in our individual actions, they exist at the community level, and they exist at the organizational level. And you can't really have any kind of long-term physical, measurable, demonstrable change without some kind of shift first at the personal level.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course at the organization and
right.
So I had a couple questions. One was, you talked really beautifully about the personal values, and you talked about organizational values. Were you also going to talk about kind of like the local community level? Because I, as someone who's just starting out in birding, and kind of like, I don't know nobody else I know is interested in birding or is not, excited about it. So I was like, okay, I'm in San Francisco, I'll join the local chapter, the Golden Gate Audubon or whatever. And I don't know anybody there. And, so it's like, how do you start building a community around you that is interested in some of the same values you're interested in? Because I think that kind of shared love for nature is something that it's like a deeply human and a deeply alive thing. So I'm wondering if you could answer that.
Now, that's a really great question. I think similar to the question in the chat about what can make birding more inclusive and approachable, and Harlan's dog is being very adorable. Just wanted to.
that is.
I'm like,
Odie.
Oh, I mean, Zoom pets, probably best thing from the pandemic. Anyway, I think there's a lot of answers to what can make birding more approachable. Also, like the question of what can I do to make this kind of values driven birding effort something other folks can attach themselves to. I think some degree it is about communication. It is about word choice. It is about who is the messenger. It is about the history of that messenger. It's about the history of that message. I think some of those things in semantics, that you have to make, what your beliefs are have to be reflected in the words that you use in those beliefs. So I, for example, I try not to the best of my ability, I try to avoid ever saying community engagement because I don't think it means anything. I think it's way too ambiguous. I will say community organizing. I will say community developing, community partnership, sharing power in the community co-authorship, community mobilizing, community collaboration. I will say all of that before community engagement because I don't think that means anything. And I think too, one of the first steps anybody can take is knowing a little bit more about the history of the place that they're at to help them answer the question, how did we get here? Because answering how do we get here, hopefully shed some light on what you should do next, because it's just like, well, we shouldn't be doing that. How did we get here? We should at least start by not doing what we did to get here. Let's at least start there. And it is an exercise of philosophy. It is an exercise of your beliefs to go towards something that does not exist currently. The diverse and inclusive birding community may have its moments, but it doesn't exist today. For that to exist today, we are transforming what things are currently in the birding community. And I hope folks are a part of things. So I may have co-founded Freedom Birders, but the idea of history-based birding tours have existed far before me.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope that they continue far after me. I think that there's a benefit to thinking about things in terms of obsolescence when you're an organization. I think that there's a benefit, like my scholarship, until education is free and accessible to all people, we have scholarships to give out. Until we're in a world that we literally can't imagine today, we have work to do until we get there. And it does take some perspective to figure out what that looks like, because I don't know what that looks like. I just know that I would like that. I know that if college was free and accessible, we wouldn't need scholarships to help folks afford it.
Well, right? I think what you're saying is really interesting. And I think, the fact that I'm noticing, I don't know how comfortable I feel on some of these Zoom calls or some of these birding events I'm going to, where everyone is like significantly older than me and sort of looks a certain way and is from a certain socioeconomic background, which I'm not from, then but I think what you're saying is really important. It's like I want to take that feeling of not feeling included, and I want to not have another person feel that way. And so how do I do that? Well, why don't I get some of my other friends of color interested in birding? Why don't I go and work with an organization that is about getting birding into different types of communities? Like I just sort of think about, like, rather than sitting with that discomfort and having it push me away, maybe I open my heart and walk towards it a little bit and say, how can I actually be, a key to somebody else feeling more included?
And
therefore I feel more included.
Right. And some example, I would say, and Julia, you came on video. Maybe you have a question too. I'll get to you. Oh, you just want to say hi. That's okay too. But think of it maybe to some extent this way. If you have a favorite song, a favorite band, a favorite artist, how would you want someone to like them? You know that they probably won't like them just because you do. And like, hey, I like this. You should too. It's great. David Bowie, great artist. That's a bad example. Everyone loves David Bowie. It doesn't matter. Yeah. That was a terrible example.
Yeah, everybody loves David Bowie.
Right, exactly. But without that, it's just like you gotta be introspective. It does take some self-awareness to think, who is the messenger? I'm the messenger, but who is the messenger? How am I messaging this? What word choice am I using? And am I aware of things that have happened in the past that have defined the way things are right now? Because, like, you know, we are coming to this world with some of these things by society already defined for us. And sometimes we fall into the same narrative of things, and then we perpetuate some of those same narratives by doing some of the same things. So it's just, how do you know what's inside the box so you can think outside of it? It does take time. It does take research, history, and like listening. That
Saying, you know, like maybe just making it more specific, you're saying, okay, so if I feel this discomfort, or, you know, if my niece, our family is from India, if my niece is like, I don't feel comfortable being here because nobody looks like me, none of these kids look like me, if we're out in the wild, then, you know, then me saying, hey, you know, let me personally investigate so that I can teach her about how birding got like to be like this. I mean, like a lot of things got to
it would be affirming. I think I think you affirm that feeling, like, yeah, you feel you're in a position of discomfort because you're a visible minority and you get treated differently because of that. And that can be, you know, something that can be very terrible and something that keeps people away from birding. But it could also be something that folks build community around. And, you know, your idea of saying, yeah, what if I just build community with the people I immediately know? That's what you can do. That makes a difference. And, you know, again, birding doesn't have to be the activity where you got somebody pointing in front of a large group. Birding can be the thing that you do when you get some beers, you get a picnic blanket, you sit down, you just look at stuff, you know, like there's just so many. And that's just a lazy example because I did that a couple days ago, but it's just, there are so many ways to re-operationalize the birding experience that it isn't what it always was to you or could have been to you. It can be so many different things.
I think that's really beautiful. I think that idea of making it about, you know, I guess for me, like I look to nature and I look to ecology and I look to the complexity and diversity of life. And that's how life has sustained itself for, you know, 4.5 billion years. So if we're going to make a more comfortable and stronger organization or country or, you know, species, then I think like looking at that and saying, like you were saying, like, okay, so if I want to meet more kinds of people that look like me who are birders, let me go out and find those kind of people. Or if I want more young people to go out.
Or let them find you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay.
Yeah. That's why I'm doing a big week in DC, because I don't know where all the blackbirders are in DC. So I'm just going to try to make myself easy to find, you know, like let's see where we go. And like, that's something where I'm trying. Yeah, right. I'm going to be like, blackbird over here, get my number. Yeah. So like, we'll see. Well, you know, like that's the thing too, that like these answers can be different. These answers are part of a journey. These answers are personal to me, you know? Right. And so I like answering the questions, and I like that we had this back and forth talking, because I feel like the more relevant it is to you, or the more helpful I can be, one, but then also the more relevant it is to you, the more likely you are to do something about it then. Because you're just like, yeah, I have a group chat of people who could be bird watchers. I can just text them a bird meme right now and then just get them thinking, you know, playing a little seed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I appreciate you chatting with me. And I do think it's a very empowering idea to say, from the discomfort, what can I crack inside and what can kind of grow out of that, so that I can connect to others in a more inclusive way.
I appreciate that. And, you know, with that, I know that we've hit an hour. I don't want to take up more of everyone's precious time. You know, I've even on like, and I know it says 9:03, but on my time, and from the moment I started talking, I've reached 1 hour and 1 minute. So I want to say thank you, everybody. This has been incredible. Jennifer, thank you for inviting me. I'm really glad that we can get this started, and I hope to come to, I'm just going to say the wrong Mississippi, but Sinisippi. I hope I can find myself in Illinois soon, and, you know, see what your chapter is doing, because, you know, somebody is agreed with me in the chat Very much going in the right direction, very positive things happening. And I'm, excited that I get to be a part of it in this way.
Do you know about Sand Bluff here in Rockford?
Do I know about the 4 peregrine falcon eggs?
Sand Bluff, yeah, the place where a lot of birders go.
I think maybe Jennifer talked about it.
So Sand Bluff is actually located at Colored Sands Forest Preserve, and it's a bird banding station. It's an area that we had designated as an important bird area last year through collaboration with Mississippi and Sand Bluff and the Winnebago County Forest Preserve.
Nice.
Yeah, the first time I ever saw a can of hawk, where when they capture the hawk, they put it into a tin can.
I thought that's what you said. I said a can of hawk. Where do they do that? Okay.
To protect the hawk and the person.
Oh, well, that's smart. That's smart. Yeah, I guess you got to do that.
It's amazing.
Oh,
I hope you can come.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I hope you can come to the Rockford area.
I will.
Yeah,
Rockford for sure.
I hope you can come here too. I have enjoyed meeting with you before this meeting. I enjoyed listening to you talk this evening, and I so appreciate your insights. And yes, if the Freedom Birders are out doing a tour, I would love for you to stop in Rockford.
Oh, absolutely. Because that's the thing. I'm just working at the pace of 2 people in their free time. So I think it will grow more and it will do more. And I hope it means a lot to the folks that can be a part of it. So, having this platform to share it means a lot too.
Yeah, we'll definitely share that information on Mississippi as well as the scholarship, so people have an opportunity to apply before the deadline.
Yes, before the deadline. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.